Hey everyone, welcome back. I've got a really great video for you today. I'm excited to be here with Alice Bowley. She's over in Bath in England. Alice, like many of us, was living a really active, super busy, pretty great life, and then all of a sudden got really sick with chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, CFS, and went to doctors and was told that she would never recover. But she didn't accept that. And although the journey was not easy, I'm sure she did eventually find her way past it, is now fully recovered, and is working to help lots of other people to also recover as well. So Alice, it's so great to have you here today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Raelan. It's so great to be here. Thanks for everything you do.
Yeah, I was just saying before we hit record that I don't even know a lot of the details of your stories. So just personally, I'm excited. Most of the people I interview, I have no idea how they recovered before we start talking, because I don't really care. I'm just whatever worked, that's what we're going to put out there. So I'm excited to hear about your journey. So what does this all look like for you?
So like you said, I was really busy working on a farm as an organic grower. I have a dog. I was up every morning and night walking the dog. Really active life. I guess looking back, I had some symptoms maybe before then, but no fatigue. I went away to live in Greece to volunteer in a refugee community centre, which was an amazing experience, even though it was incredibly challenging, both emotionally and physically. And I was there for a few months. And then one day I pretty much couldn't get out of bed. I was just sleeping and sleeping. I felt absolutely exhausted. And I just thought I had a virus or something like that. And that kind of came and went for a few weeks. And I thought, this is strange, a virus coming back. And I just had fatigue at that point, nothing else. I was like, this is not a virus I'd had before. I knew I'd been overdoing it, but I wasn't familiar with what was going on. So I came back to the UK and carried on working, and it just kept returning. And people at work were like, what is this virus? And I was like, I don't know. It was fluctuating on and off, to the point where soon enough my weekends didn't really exist. My evenings didn't exist. And then a friend of mine kind of said, oh, maybe it's ME. And I'd never really heard of it. I'd heard of it, but I wasn't familiar with it. And all I knew was like, that's a terrifying chronic illness. I guess this is something probably some people can relate to, that moment where you're like, oh, maybe I've got a long-term illness. And eventually went to the doctors. Over about a year, eventually got diagnosed with ME, CFS. And that was where it began to get worse, really. Kind of the nocebo effect, perhaps, where the doctors kind of said, you've got a long-term chronic illness, there's no known cure, and you've got to learn to live with your symptoms.
What did you think when you heard that?
I was terrified. It's actually just giving me goosebumps saying that. It's weird when you've recovered and it's been a while, because you kind of almost forget when your life has become rich again and you're well. But it was horrific. It was like, the worst thing. Obviously, what I was experiencing was really challenging, but you think, oh, I'm sick. Maybe there'll be a route out of it, and I'll be given something. But what I was suggested to do was a pacing, where I had to record how many hours I was kind of active each day. And then if I still had symptoms, reduce those hours. So it was just getting reduced. And it was just like, well, what am I learning to live with? I thought, then at my work, my boss kind of said, maybe you need to change careers, because I was off work all the time. They were incredibly supportive. But hearing that for me was like, heartbreaking. I was in my mid-30s and I always wanted to have kids. And I thought, well, how am I ever going to do that? Because now I've been told that I'm just going to basically be in bed and be cared for by my partner and my friends and family the rest of my life. It was terrifying. And looking back, that fear really made me worse. I got a lot worse from that point, I think, because I was living with huge anxiety. I'm sure you can relate to that terrifying feeling.
For me, that was one of the hardest things when I first got sick, because my mom had been sick my whole life. And I'd seen one of the worst case scenarios played out right before my eyes. And that's all I knew of this illness. So that feeling of this is the rest of my life was what was the hardest. If someone had told me it was temporary, there was hope, then, it would have been different. But just this feeling like, I can't live the rest of my life like this. I just can't. I'm not up for this. This is not what I want. This is no way to live.
Being told that I had to learn to live with it, I just felt just terrified. And I got worse to the point where I was I was housebound. I could every day I would try to go outside. For me, nature has always been healing, and I was like really determined to try and continue. But, as I'm sure lots of people have experienced, you just try and walk a few steps and it's like you're walking up a mountain, and you've just run a marathon and you're like, I don't understand. I've just been working so fit and healthy, for years. Yeah, it just felt terrifying. And then I just was pretty much on the sofa, and it gets to the point where you can't read. It's difficult to watch TV, have conversations. I really struggled. Yeah, it's no exaggeration to say, I really reached rock bottom. You're just spending all day staring at a wall, thinking about how your life, what's happened to your life. It's absolutely terrifying. And so to be told by doctors that there isn't really a way out, I guess I was offered like a group session of people with ME, but it wasn't a session for like how to recover. It was like getting together to like how to deal with your symptoms. And I couldn't get there anyway. I couldn't drive. I couldn't get on a bus. And if I had energy, I wasn't using it for that. So for me, it was just heartbreaking that all the doctors had to offer me was like tough. Pretty much. That's what it felt like at the time. They were kinder words than that, but they didn't offer me anything substantial.
I don't know how we change that message on a more global scale in conventional medicine, because it's such a massive thing that we need to address. Because when so many people, this is the first message that they're getting, and especially that we know for many people, the role of stress is massive in impacting their symptoms and their recovery. It's just setting people up for disaster. And I always have this idea or this picture in my head that doctors must look down on YouTube channels and things sort of with disdain, like, you didn't go to medical school, like there's nothing to be taken seriously there. But I might be being too jaded or too skeptical, because I actually do have medical doctors reaching out to me now and, wanting to come onto the channel or wanting to interview me. So I think there are a lot of open-minded medical professionals out there, and we, need to give them some credit. So anyways, whatever we can do to change that, I don't know how we do.
Just keep doing what we're doing, I guess. I guess at the time I was very much fixed on this idea of like science and medicine, and I identified very much with it being 100% physical illness that was like a disease that I had, and the cure would probably be in a pill form or an operation form, because that's what I was told. I used to like use herbal medicine and alternative stuff, but I just thought I have this disease, and if anybody kind of told me like, is it anything to do with stress or what you're feeling, I felt belittled. I felt like they were saying it was my fault, and that it wasn't real. So I was resistant to sometimes when people talked about that. I had said to my doctor, could it have anything to do with past traumas I experienced? And they'd said no. And so I just believed it all. And then I kind of felt offended if anybody brought that up. So one of my friends eventually said, a friend of mine had me for 2 years, was in bed, and she fully recovered. I just saw her at a festival dancing, and I was like, no way. I'd never heard of anybody recovering. And I just almost didn't believe him. But the thought that I could ever dance again, I know that sounds cheesy, but I was like, maybe I can dance again. So I obviously was interested in how she'd recovered, which is how I found out about the technique that I was eventually to use to recover.
Yeah, I don't think it sounds cheesy at all. My last interview I did with an amazing woman named Alice, I'll link it up here if people want to check it out, but she was talking about how exciting it was to do dishes.
Yeah.
So I'm always curious to hear, because I know we all try some things that don't work. So before we dive into all the stuff that did, what were some of your kind of failed attempts?
So I was using herbal medicine to like boost my immune system. And a lot of these things I think could have been supporting me in various ways. I was trying to meditate, which I'd never done before. But for me, when I was meditating, I didn't really understand what it was. I thought it was about just like clearing your mind of thoughts, which I just couldn't do because I was so anxious and, upset that my life had fallen to pieces. And I was trying to get outside every day, even just for a minute if I could. And I was doing this pacing technique, which, for me quite quickly seemed to just almost be making things worse. So I tried a few things, but I was kind of waiting for the doctors for a while. And when they didn't really come up with anything, that's when I kind of reached rock bottom. And I guess I reached a point where I realized that I had to adjust my perspective, and I had to maybe consider different techniques and ways of thinking. I guess I'd thought before maybe a lot of things were like a bit hippie or wishy-washy, and I was resistant to it. Even though I was into like alternative medicine and some things, I was just resistant. I guess now I recognize I was resistant to feeling things and to connecting to myself, which is ultimately what I needed to do to recover, but I was resistant to it. So I reached rock bottom, and then I was just like, well, either I'm just facing a life like this, or I just need to start getting curious and asking questions. So eventually I spoke to my friend's friend who had recovered and discovered that she was real and she had recovered. And it was just incredible, probably one of the most, helpful conversations of my life. And she just said to me, that she said, there's this amazing technique called the mind-body reconnect. But she just said to me, the first thing I was told to do was to connect with the emotion of joy, because your body's gone into kind of a permanent fight or flight state. And the first thing to do is just to try and do things you enjoy, which might sound stupid, but when you're that unwell, you just cut off everything, you don't even do anything. And if I had any energy, I was trying to clean up and contribute to my household, to my partner. I wasn't doing anything I enjoyed. So that's what I did. Basically, one day I just started doing things I enjoyed. I watched the sunrise with my dog. I baked a cake. I chatted to a friend, and I just started to notice that if the fear lifted and I felt some joy, that something had changed in me.
Okay, so how incredible that you got to connect with an actual human that recovered. That just seems like really a gift and some concrete hope, not just some story you read about or video you watched, but I think it's when you get to actually speak to someone, it feels more real and you really get the buy-in. So she had used the Mind Body Reconnect, which Susie, who I meant to say, I recently interviewed, not you, Alice, was also talking about. So did you immediately look into that, or what did you do from there?
Yeah, so I researched that, and everything I read about it just started hitting buttons. And I was like, oh, right, okay, this is feeling really familiar. And all of my skepticism and my really kind of like, very strict logic, science-based, not that this isn't scientific, but, this idea that like, well, it just can't be anything about feelings or emotions. All of that started to shift because everything I read, I could really relate to. I was still skeptical when I read testimonials and reviews that people had written about it on the internet. I just didn't believe them because they were saying it was amazing and I got my life back, and I just couldn't believe it because my doctors had said that. Well, they'd said that wasn't possible, and who are you going to believe? Somebody on the internet or the doctor in the uniform? So I started researching it, and then everything I read just started to connect and feel right to me. And that's when I reached out to one of the practitioners, Claire Caldwell, the founder of the organization. And she just really quickly replied. And I started like pretty much within a few days of having discovered it.
Okay. So I've had people talk to me a little bit about this program, but I don't fully understand what it looks like. So once you get started, what does that involve?
Basically, this is the other reason I was skeptical, and maybe some other people are, that you have like hour-long talking sessions. So I was like, well, surely I need to be doing something physical, You have hour-long talking sessions with people where the practitioner will explain to you what the processes are going on in your body, between your body and your mind and your brain, and how your symptoms are being generated. And so you get this information and knowledge, and then you also get taught tools that you use daily throughout your life to start to connect why your symptoms are being generated and what you need to change in your life in order to respond to them. So although it's a talking therapy, it's very much about what you do. And if you don't really engage with it, you won't get better. So there's this 1 hour session, maybe every week or every other week as it becomes, but it's all about what you are doing throughout your day and what you're discovering for yourself. So it's very self-led, you're guided, but it's about you connecting with what you need and taking action in your life.
And when you started this, what did you start to see results right away?
Pretty quickly, because for me, it wasn't the only thing, but one of the things that was contributing to my symptoms, like I said, with when the doctors kind of gave me a life sentence, for me, fear was a big factor in generating my symptoms. It wasn't the only thing. But when I spoke to Claire and started to understand, like she herself, all the practitioners are people who have recovered from chronic illness, and she herself had it for 15 years and recovered. So speaking to her and hearing her say oh yeah, I've worked with thousands of people who have recovered, I just suddenly had this hope. And that alone started to make me feel a bit better. It wasn't enough, but that and the connecting with things, starting to do things I enjoyed in my life that I'd started even before I had a first session with her, that alone showed me that how I behaved and felt and thought was going to impact my symptoms. So I knew I was on the right path. Even though I knew it was going to be a long journey, I knew that it was right.
Imagine that helped with the buy-in with your inner skeptic and the doctor that you could still hear in the back. When you start to see progress, I think that's just like, okay,
yeah,
I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah, that's it. So I guess I just knew straight away that it was for me. And so I knew that, getting rid of the fear and having hope and knowing that like there was a way out meant that I wasn't permanently sat there thinking about how terrifying everything is and what my life looked like. And I'm starting to think about, well, what might it look like now if I recover? And just that alone had such a huge impact on my nervous system, and therefore my symptoms. But as the work progressed, then it was about connecting with all of the emotions, So the basis of it is that when you get a symptom, that's your body kind of communicating with you that there's something going on for you that you need to respond to. So maybe I'd start feeling, really, really unwell if I was around a certain person or in a certain situation, because I was feeling angry and not expressing it, or I was feeling sad and not allowing myself to, or I was having lots of judgmental thoughts and not responding to them. And all of this would create a kind of crisis in my body that my body was responding to, which is what the fight or flight kind of system in our body is for. It's for responding to crisis and dangerous situations. My dangerous situation was internal, because I was having all these emotions just blocked up, brimming to the surface.
It's such a different way to think about things too, because when we get physical symptoms, but my whole life, I'd never thought, let me just stop and pay attention to what's happening in this moment. Like, who am I with? Or what did I just finish doing? Or what am I dreading for the rest? There's nothing like that. You have a physical symptom and you think, what just happened inside my body? It has no connection to my thoughts or my environment. Strangely, no connection to my brain, which is probably my most important organ that controls my entire body. But there's a disconnect wall there. So no communication happening. But it's just such a different way to start thinking about things. And I think that's a part of the training, or the brain training, is just changing our whole way of thinking about symptoms. At least, not all symptoms. Sometimes the symptom is something physical, like you're having a heart attack. But with a lot of the cases with conditions like long COVID and any CFS, we're seeing that there is that mind. I said I want to stop saying mind body, because I feel like I appreciate the program and the name, but I feel like it can lead to people's skepticism. I like saying brain body. Like, let's really solidify that it's not like a woo-woo kind of thing. Like, it really is. We're looking at our brain, we're looking at our body, and we're looking at that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, all the systems, and I guess that's the thing, is that in modern medicine, we treat them separately. You have a physical doctor, you have maybe a mental health doctor, but you also have doctors treating separate parts of your body. But every part of the body works together, relies on each other. The brain is physical. It's in our heads. It affects how we respond to things, and how we respond to things is often affected by our emotions. If I see a big scary dog in the park, I'll feel fear, and that feeling will send a message to my brain that will tell my brain to respond by, giving me energy and getting me to run away, or whatever it is I need to do. And that's how the body works. But yeah, for me, this was also completely mind blowing. I guess I was then a bit confused why I never had understood that this was how we work. Everything we feel is affected, everything. Yeah. Physical illness is affected by how we feel. Like you say, there's different things, different causes, but chronic illness for sure is being affected by what's going on inside of us and in our brain, of course.
So how did your journey to full recovery go? Was everything that you needed to get there from this program, or were there other things that you needed to incorporate?
It was from this program, but I guess, like I say, it's very self-led. So it was that kind of supported me to do my discovery. I was reading loads of books. I was exploring kind of my childhood and what I'd experienced and how that had developed, how that had caused my brain to develop, and my habits that I was living with. Also looking at society and now how that impacts how we feel and behave. For example, as women, a lot of us, myself included, kind of brought up being told to be, nice and quiet and not to be angry. Anger is actually a really healthy emotion. Rage, not so much, but anger is really important and healthy. And so it's important to be able to say no and to put boundaries in place and to be able to do that kindly. But I'd never learned that. I just learned keep all that down and be nice and smile and, make sure everyone else is okay, care for everyone else. So for me, it was a journey of learning about all of, not just, me, but like also society, family, society, and on a wider scale, how all of that impacts how we think and feel and how our brain works. because it develops over our life. So all of it has an impact.
So much of what you just said resonated. And you've mentioned, dealing with childhood things and trauma. And I think another thing, all of us, men, women, everyone on the gender spectrum has a bit of is that we don't realize is that we're walking through life with this backpack of trauma. It might be big T traumas. It might be a whole bunch of little T traumas, but we just don't realize that we're carrying it. And we think, oh, it's in the past. It doesn't matter. It wasn't that big. I don't have a right to kind of like wallow in it. And we don't give it any time or attention. And something I've come to appreciate is that especially for me through meditation, once I finally learned how, because I had your experience as well. I think I always felt like I was failing and it wasn't working. But then I took an amazing course through Soma meditation. Cannot recommend it highly enough. I'll link it above. But yeah, so it's just, you start to realize that these things in your life need space, whether it be through meditation, just acknowledging, okay, yeah, that was hard, and just kind of letting it go, or through journaling or through therapy or whatever it might be. That's such a big piece for all of us, and not just past trauma, but what do we keep loading on every day? What new traumas are we adding on, whether it's through self-criticism or, things in our environment, our relationships. So, I'm wondering for you from here, how did the rest of that recovery journey look like? What sorts of things did you have to focus on?
So just like you say, I was carrying wounds, I guess, from the past. And I think on reflection, I recognized that a lot of my life was about covering them up, so that maybe that feeling was starting to come up, and I busy myself. I was working nonstop. I was, even when I was out in Greece volunteering, there was a lot of emotions and a lot of hard things going on, and I'd just drink coffee and smoke cigarettes and work harder because then there was no time to feel it. And so I guess, having chronic fatigue stopped me, and I had to feel some stuff. And I guess a big part of that was learning what kind of meditation or mindfulness actually really was, or at least my experience, which was a part of that was sitting with my body and feeling what was going on inside. And it took a practice, but being open to what was going on. And I actually discovered this kind of pain in my chest, a kind of deep feeling of grief that was really hard to just sit with, really quite painful. And it felt quite old for me, but it felt like it had been there for a long time. But that was the first time I'd noticed it, if that makes sense. So a part of it was about sitting with that feeling and allowing it to be and acknowledging it and having some compassion for myself and recognizing that some of my habits and behaviors were coming from a place of, disconnection and pushing things away. So I guess it was about, in every moment, starting to connect with what I felt and being okay with that, and recognizing that you don't have to act on everything you feel if you're being triggered from something from the past. But maybe it's about giving space to that feeling and acknowledging it, whether that's anger or grief or fear, and saying, like, it's okay to feel that, and give space to it and make your body a safe space to feel. And from that place, decide what your response is rather than react, which I guess in the past, on reflection, I would react. I'd be very reactive, which would then cause problems, which meant I was scared of conflict, which is why I wasn't very good at putting boundaries in place. So when I learned to be safe with what I was feeling, and from a calm, strong place, respond kindly put boundaries in place with others, and then I'd get a positive response because those people cared about me and they wanted me to be boundaried. They just wanted me to be nice about it. And so it really nurtured my relationships. They got a lot stronger. And I had a lot more compassion for myself, recognizing where some of my behaviors and feelings had come from. So I guess the journey was a lot about sitting with that and doing some self-exploration and being compassionate. But then from there, being boundaried and actually putting myself first, which I like to say is like self-full rather than selfish, because when you meet your own needs, then you're in a really good place to be there for others, but being whole. I always say, like, you have to fill yourself up and give to others what overflows. Because if you're just emptying yourself, you're often acting from a very kind of stressed, disconnected place, and you're often not going to be very helpful or caring to others. And then eventually you might need caring for yourself, which is what happened to me, obviously. So I've come to learn that, like, looking after yourself is actually a really kind and giving act.
Something else I'd love for you to talk about, because I know you talked about how it was scary for you and really depressing that you might never have children one day. And that's something I'm sure a lot of people can relate to who are watching this. So any updates there?
Yeah, so basically, I trained as a Mind Body Reconnect practitioner because I absolutely loved it during lockdown, during COVID. So I actually had a really inspiring time during that really difficult period. And then I got pregnant and had a baby who is now just over 1, which is just obviously the most beautiful thing for people who want it in their lives. It's the most amazing thing. But when you've laid on your couch staring at the wall thinking that would never happen, you would never have the energy to do that. And then, then you meet that little person you created. It is, just an incredible thing. And I guess, when your life looks like one thing and then it ends up being another, it's just a pretty powerful experience.
So amazing, Alice. I'm so excited for you. It's crazy, isn't it? Once you kind of get to the other side or whatever you want to call it, just these things that you, in those dark moments, you never could have imagined. You're like, this isn't waiting for me in my future. There's no way that is possible. And then you can just do such a 180 from where you were and just have this crazy life that I just think is such a powerful message. I wish, I always say if future Raelan would have went back to sick Raelan, I never would have believed it. Like, there's no way. There's no way what you're telling me is possible. It's just never going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having enough energy to run around after a toddler, I'm not going to say it's not exhausting, but it's a healthy kind of tiredness. And I guess everything I learned about how the brain develops and my childhood and how our environment impacts how we feel and how we grow and how our physical and mental health has been incredible to raise a child with some of that knowledge and to learn from her and watch her grow, knowing what I now know about, the body and our minds and how that all works together. So, it's like I'm learning from her every day and my experience. So, it's pretty powerful.
So what does the work that you do now with people look like to support others facing illness?
Yeah, so I then trained as a Mind Body Reconnect practitioner alongside another 11 people who had fully recovered from chronic illness, including Veronica Morel, who was on your show, I think, last year. And I work with people with all sorts of chronic illness, long COVID, ME, fibromyalgia, IBS, any kind of chronic condition. I always say to people, it's about you and it's about what connects with you. Because for me, like I said, when I learned about how the Mind Body Reconnect worked and the ideas and knowledge behind it, it connected for me and it felt right. So I always say to people, if you've got a chronic condition, I'll just talk to you about it or you can read about it. And if that feels to you like it starts to make sense, then it's probably going to work for you. So I work with people much like what I went through with the Mind Body Reconnect. I teach people the knowledge and the understanding of how our emotions and our thoughts and our environment impact what goes on in our body and our brains, and I guide them in their recovery. So we're not healers, we're not some magical person who cures people. We support people in working out what they need. And it's hard. It's simple, but it's not easy. It's a real journey of really going to those places that a part of you's been blocking out, maybe because it was really difficult and painful. But the payoff is just incredible. I guess for me, I actually feel 100 times better than I ever did before I had chronic fatigue. And in some strange way, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not the experience, and that might sound like a strange thing to say, but it was a wake-up call that I really needed. A horrible, horrible wake-up call. But once I woke up, it's just really helped me access parts of myself and feel stronger and connected and learn how to create a life that's fulfilling and have stronger relationships. So for me, it went a lot beyond chronic illness. And for a lot of people I work with, that's their experience too. It's a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, I love that you're out here doing this work. And I think it's also relatable. It makes sense for me as well. I had similar, it's so hard to say, like I'd feel a little bit sick trying to get the words out, but I'm like, I don't think if I had the option to take this illness experience away that I could do it, because it's completely transformed my life, even though it was hell. End of sentence. That being said, do I want to go back to the person I was before? And would I have learned some of these things along the way? Perhaps, but it's such a growth boot camp and it completely changes the way you approach life and your health. It's a great silver lining.
Some people say, disease as teacher, and it's not a way. I'd rather learn a different way. But when we feel unwell, it's important to look at, well, what might be going on for me? What might my body be communicating with me? And of course, there's lots of different types of illness. There's, you get a virus and you feel unwell. But also your brain is involved even in that response. If we're run down, it's going to respond differently to if we're connected and listening. It's just seeing it as a guide. And I guess for me, it was a big part of it was seeing that like my illness wasn't something separate from me. It wasn't a disease that I had to fight and win. It was a part of me that I had to embrace and learn from, which was horrible. It was hard because it was so unpleasant, but I had to just actually go, this is me. What's it saying? You know, what does it need? What do I need?
And for those of you watching, everything that you need to learn more about the work that Alice is doing and to follow her and learn more will be in the video description. So I really encourage you to expand that description and click on some of those links and check it out. Because Alice, I'm just so grateful that you are out here doing work and you've taken so much from your experience and now using it to help other people, because it just breaks my heart to think of all the people that are out there still trapped in suffering. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your story today. Everything you shared is so helpful and so insightful and relatable. And just thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's amazing.
Thank you so much, Raelan. It's been really amazing to be able to share my story and also just, continue spreading the message, because we really need it to be out there that recovery is absolutely possible and you can find your way.
Yeah, I never want to say don't listen to your doctor. I'm not saying that. But
not at all. Yeah.
but I'm not saying it if it tells you can't recover.
Yeah, just talk to lots of people and ask around. If you've met somebody who's recovered, talk to them.
Yeah.
Have a conversation with a real person who has been unwell and who's got better. That's my advice, because that's what we need. You know, doctors know a lot, but we actually also know a lot about ourselves. And that's what I came to learn as well, is that like we are actually the best authority on our health and what we need. We might need support with that, but we certainly don't need to be told that we can't recover or that we need a certain pill and it will make it better. Actually, maybe there's something more and maybe we can do that.
Yeah, it's an important mindset shift. I started thinking of doctors as consultants. Again, not saying disregard medical advice, but instead of disregarding my own authority, my own insight, my own value or contribution to that whole process, I used to just be a sheep doing whatever they told me. But it's just, if what one doctor's telling you doesn't make sense, go to another one.
And in fact, that's what doctors do. They give you a medicine. If it doesn't work, they give you another one. If that doesn't work, they try something else. And so actually, like, maybe we need to do that and we need to broaden, the picture. Yeah. And I read the other day that, it takes 40 years for information to end up in medical textbooks and to be training, people up. So a lot of information's coming out now. A lot of this is, you can find it. There is scientific research, loads of it, pointing out the connection between our feelings, our brain and our body and physical illness. It's out there, but it might not have reached your doctor just yet. That doesn't mean it's not real and you can't look into it. And some doctors, I'm sure, well, in fact, there are loads of doctors who are learning about it and feel really passionate about it as well. But yeah, just trust yourself and don't give up. That's what I would say. Just try and access that part of you that is just like still fighting, and know that it might be hard, but it also will be incredibly rewarding.
Such an important part. Absolutely. And for those of you watching, I'm going to link for you Veronica's interview here on the channel. It was really amazing. She had such a rough journey, but such an incredible recovery and just a lot of insights from that one as well. So if what Alice is sharing resonates, you're really going to appreciate this one also. So thank you again, Alice. I really appreciate you being here. This has been amazing. Thank you to all of you watching. As always, I look forward to your comments. I love hearing your experiences. Share what's worked for you. What do you think about all of this? It really is so much of this, all of us just coming together and helping each other out. So really looking forward to what you have to say. Big hugs to you. Keep at it, whatever you're facing. You have totally got this. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see you in the next one.